In today's video, I'll be revealing a surprising retirement spending pattern that I've noticed repeatedly in over 15 years as a financial planner. How two people starting with an identical level of savings, and one can run out of money very quickly by age 65, while the other can go on to have lasting financial success. And throughout years of working with retirees, I've documented these exact decisions and how they create these wildly different financial trajectories despite identical starting balances. If you're new to the channel, my name is Justin. I own a financial planning firm in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, where we help retirees all across the country, help them make smart financial decisions. And that's exactly why I'm making today's video. I want to show you the critical differences between successful and unsuccessful retirement approaches that I've observed firsthand, and why seemingly minor decisions can create massive long-term consequences, and also share some strategies with you on how to avoid those bad consequences. So let's dig right into this. Okay, so why do retirement outcomes vary so dramatically despite people starting with identical savings balances? Well, retirement success isn't just about how much you start with and how big your retirement account is, it's how well you manage it over time. And you might be hearing that and say, well, yeah, duh, of course, but I've found that often really smart and really successful people, even those who built a lot of wealth, can make small mistakes that start to compound very, very quickly. And we have a lot of data and statistics that shows that almost 25% of retirees deplete their savings prematurely despite having more than adequate starting amounts. MetLife ran a study in 2017 that showed that 1 in 5 retirees who took a lump sum retirement payment, either lump sum pension or took a large lump sum from a 401k or other plan, they depleted it in 5.5 years on average. They also found that based on more recent studies and data from today, it's happening more quickly. Today, 1 in 3 who took a lump sum from a defined contribution plan had exhausted it in average within 5 years. Additional statistics show that almost half of retirees forego a formal withdrawal strategy, opting to just take what they need as they go, or basically just wing it. Only 22% of retirees will draw down their savings using any kind of systematic process or something based on a fixed annual percentage. And so even people who saved very well will make small mistakes that have big impacts, as you can see in some of those studies. And traditional retirement calculators will often fail to capture these different outcomes because they assume just smooth returns in spending. They don't factor in human behavior, which is the most critical factor. And I found that specific behavior patterns is what separates sustainable from depleted retirements. So you have overspending, there's investing emotionally, not taking taxes into account, underestimating healthcare costs, and then other psychological factors like overconfidence, social comparison, wanting to maintain a lifestyle that they had previously, even though maybe, intuitively they know that they probably shouldn't be spending that much, optimism bias. Another big one is just complacency, thinking that because they have a big amount saved, or they feel like they have a big amount saved, that everything's just going to turn out okay. And people thinking that, well, I'll have time to adjust. Maybe I can be a little bit less responsible now. I have time to fix that later on. So all those things can really snowball. And we also find that the spending approach in the first 5 years is going to predict a lot of that long-term outcome. So overspending early is like going on a dive with 2 oxygen tanks and then very quickly blowing through that first oxygen tank. Now you have to finish your dive, finish the rest of the mapped out route, and then get back on 1 oxygen tank. So putting yourself in a really bad spot. And withdrawal strategy differences can have one of the biggest impact on portfolio longevity. So rigid withdrawals, or just sticking to one flat percentage no matter what, that can be a little bit risky if no adjustments are made. I've used research from Javier Estrada before, and he shows that flexible strategies dramatically increase success rates. I'd think of it like flying a plane. You can't fly the whole thing on autopilot. You're gonna need to have manual adjustments made at some point. If there's bad weather, if you're veering off course, or there's another plane that's off their vector flight path and you have to adjust, you can't just fly the whole thing on autopilot. Retirement should be no different. And retirement success will correlate a lot more with behavior than your starting balance. So behavior will multiply or destroy whatever balance you have. So you can have a very high level of savings or a very modest level of savings, but bad habits ruin even big portfolios. The spending mistakes are often always proportional to the portfolio size. A lot of people will see that big portfolio number and feel more secure and think they can more or less get away with some irresponsible spending or not having a plan, or like I said before, just winging it. And now, to better understand these dramatically different outcomes, let's examine the specific approaches, decisions, and results of two retirees who started with identical savings. So we'll look at two people. We'll look at Jimmy and Chuck, and they're both starting with, let's just say, $1 million to make the math easy. Let's assume that the majority of it is in a pre-tax account, like a traditional IRA. Maybe they have some outside in a non-retirement account or cash, maybe a little bit in Roth, but we'll assume most of it is pre-tax. And we'll start with the depletion path. We'll start with Jimmy. And so Jimmy had a good career. He made a very good income. He always considered himself pretty laid back, kind of go with the flow kind of guy. He had his investments basically 100% in the stock market for all of his career because the swings never bothered him. He honestly didn't really look at it that much or pay that much attention to it. And he had it in his mind that he'd withdraw about 8% a year. He saw a video somewhere on YouTube that he could take out 8% a year. Never really looked into it or checked it out. He just thought, well, I saw this, so it's sounds good to me. It's legit. But he always thought, well, my portfolio has always done well for the last 10, 15 years, so that really shouldn't be a problem. He was also used to having a pretty easy lifestyle. He made good income in his career, so he was always the type that him and his wife, if they wanted something, they would just go out and buy it. They didn't really stress about it. So he didn't really think about making that adjustment as he went into retirement. He was used to having a nice house with high level of property taxes. And then he also wanted to treat himself to a new car when he retired. He thought, I've sacrificed for years. I deserve this. He probably knew deep down that it was probably not the smartest decision, but he just pushed that voice down. He pushed Jiminy Cricket away, right? And he just listened to the impulse and wanted to get that car. He had to have it. And so now one thing Jimmy didn't account for in taking that 8% out in the first year, so he didn't account for the taxes. He wasn't thinking about it. So to get $80,000, if we assume he has somewhere around a 12% tax rate, he has to take closer to $90,000. So the first year, he's down $90,000. He also wanted to get that car, so that was another $70,000. Then he also was used to taking a family vacation every year that he would pay for, and he'd have extended family come and they'd be a part of it. And he took a little bit of pride in being the one that could pay for it and provide that experience for his family. He didn't want to let that go. And now, taking all those factors into account, within the first year and a half, he's already down closer to $800,000 just from those expenditures. And now, lo and behold, Jimmy gets hit with a 20% market drop. And now, he was always a risk taker before, didn't bother him. But what he didn't realize is how his emotions would change once he retired and he no longer was drawing that paycheck anymore. So even though he didn't expect this or anticipate it, he actually started to panic. And then he did the worst thing possible that he could do, is he took all his money out of the 100% stock allocation and moved it all to bonds. And now what he didn't realize, because he never paid that much attention to his investments in the first place, he didn't realize that bonds can actually lose money as well. And that's where some of the generic advice can hurt retirees a lot, who might be having money just sit in target date allocation funds or other funds like that. They don't realize that bonds are not all the same. They're not a secure catch-all for a guaranteed source that never fluctuates. There's a lot of differences and a lot of different types of bonds out there. So you want to make sure that you know which types that you need to be in and how they all react. So Jimmy actually lost some more money after he put it in bonds, just like happened in 2022, panicked further, and then said, I'm just moving it all into money market. I have to stop the bleeding, which is a phrase I've heard a lot in my career. And so Jimmy wasn't just making emotional decisions. He got caught in something called recency bias. That's where people believe that things have been good recently, they'll always be good. He was used to those really good average returns over the last 10, 12 years, and he wasn't thinking how he'd react if that did not continue. And so now Jimmy is in a very difficult spot. So now his portfolio has dropped from $1 million. He started making those expenditures. He was down to 800,000, got hit with a 20% drop, and now he's down closer to 600 to 640,000 just within 2 years of retirement. So now if he doesn't make some drastic adjustments, which will probably be difficult for him, then he's looking at very quickly depleting the rest of his assets. If he continues to make $80,000 withdrawals every year, that's a 12% withdrawal rate on that 600 to 640,000, and he will very quickly deplete that. And now before we move on, you may be wondering if you're on the right track, or hopefully you're not making the mistakes that Jimmy's making. But if you'd like some advice, click the first link in the description below, fill out a quick questionnaire. I will send you back a personalized video analyzing your retirement plan and pointing out some steps that we could take to possibly improve on that. All right, so now let's look at retiree number 2 and the sustainability path. We'll look at Chuck. So Chuck started withdrawing 3.5% to 4% initially. And more importantly, he made a plan. It's extremely important to have a plan going into retirement. There's a quote that I heard years ago. I don't know who said it, but they said that most Americans spend more time planning their next vacation than they do their retirement. And it's important to make sure you are planning this out. And that's what Chuck did. He had a plan. He started out with a balanced 70% stock, 30% bond allocation, which I've mentioned in other videos. That could be somewhere close to the sweet spot for longevity and retirement. And now I'm not saying that's how everybody should be invested. Investments are something that should be highly tailored to you, but that seems to be a pretty good starting spot when you're going to need to make withdrawals and you don't want to have inflation deplete the portfolio too quickly. And Chuck was more focused on memories and getting value out of the money, aligning it to his lifestyle. He wasn't focused on just buying stuff. He didn't feel pressured into maintaining a certain lifestyle. That's not what motivated him. And he had guardrails in place as well. He was perfectly willing to trim some of his discretionary spending if he had to, and he wasn't anchored to a certain spending number. More importantly, he expected bad years to happen. He didn't flinch. He knew that bad years were going to come, and so he set that expectation beforehand and knew how he would react and not to make any emotional investment decisions during that time. Chuck also made sure to be aware of the taxes and made sure that he was being smart and intentional about where he was drawing money from. He tried to take money out of his non-retirement account if he could capture a 0% long-term capital gains rate, made sure to take some Roth where appropriate, made sure to perhaps look at doing Roth conversions if that was a strategy that would benefit him. But overall, he was conscious of the tax impact and was taking steps to mitigate that. He also looked at downsizing his home because once he retired, he realized how much house he had and that he just didn't want to pay all the expenses that came along with that. That reminds me of another client I worked with recently where her house was costing her somewhere around $15,000 a year in total cost with property taxes, insurance, and she realized she just didn't need that much house. So she downsized it, saved her about $8,000 a year, and then she also had some money left over from the sale and repurchase of a new home to boost her savings so she could do traveling and other stuff that she liked. So she got to do all that and she didn't feel like she was giving anything up. And so now while the differences between these two outcomes are pretty clear, the underlying causes of Jimmy's premature depletion reveals critical lessons for anybody that's approaching retirement. And so now why did Jimmy come close to running out of money at 65? Well, number one, he got hit with a bad sequence of returns risk in the beginning, but he didn't adjust to that. He still planned on withdrawing because he needed to maintain that lifestyle. He still had all those obligations, things he needed to fund. So doing that is like drilling a hole in your own boat, right? You need to be able to have some flexibility to adjust if market returns aren't working out as soon as you want them to or in a bad order. His lifestyle was locked in. There was really no flexibility. And then he fell into a lot of the behavioral finance traps. He was too overconfident. He was in denial about negative outcomes. He wasn't prepared. He didn't have any contingency plans in place. He was just winging it through retirement and thought because he had a big number, because $1 million seems like a lot, that would last him, and he didn't really have to do much intentional planning with it. And he really just underestimated how quick overspending could compound and catch up to him. And now that you've seen why Jimmy ran out of money quickly, While Chuck maintains security, let's take a look at how you can use this information and take advantage of it to optimize your own plan. And so here's some things that I do and that I want to focus on when I'm working with clients. So number one, we want to set that withdrawal strategy, right? It's smart to start somewhere around 3.5 to 4% and then start making dynamic adjustments based on the markets, based on what's going on in your life. And now, can some people start with a higher withdrawal rate than that? Sure. We've had clients do that as long as those adjustments are made over time. So it's not something that should just be static and never changed. And most importantly, you just want to have a plan. Do not wing it. If you're going to take anything away from this video, it's that. Don't wing it in retirement. Estrada's study on dynamic withdrawal strategies in retirement basically sums everything up at the end with all the results suggest first that retirees should have a financial plan. Without one, you're simply just shooting in the dark. You also want to set some guardrails. So be able to have that flexibility to adjust or cut discretionary spending from 10 to 20% if you need to. That'll go a long way to making sure that your portfolio keeps that longevity. And now most people hear, oh, cut spending. I don't want to do that. I don't want to feel restricted. But it's not really about sacrifice. It's about control. So think of spending guardrails like a thermostat. Things get too hot or too cold, you simply just adjust it. And in our scenario, Chuck didn't see it as punishment. He saw it as freedom. Freedom to enjoy the good times because he could be more flexible when he needed to be. Your investment strategy should be specifically tailored to you. I've talked about keeping somewhere around 70% in stocks and then the rest in safe buckets, bonds, cash, something like that. And again, I'm not making a blanket recommendation to everybody. It should be highly tailored. But many of the withdrawal studies that I've looked at and referenced in other videos, like the Trinity study and others, show that having that 70-30 range leads to many of the more favorable outcomes if withdrawing 4 to 5% over time, and you need to rely on your portfolio to consistently put out that income for you. Additional research about optimal retirement glide paths showed that the typical guidance for retirees is to decrease your allocations to stocks or quote equities over time. But a lot of the research in this paper finds that increasing glide paths where the level of stock increases over time can often be more optimal. So you don't want to just follow generic retirement advice or generic retirement investment advice. Make sure it's tailored to you appropriately. And you want to be aware that downturns can and will happen. You want to expect them, and when they do, you want to be able to stick to your plan and not make any dramatic adjustments. My dad was a Navy deep sea diver. Over my shoulder, you might see a small replica of the helmet that the deep sea divers used to wear. And they used to tell them, and they'd always say before dives, their mantra was plan your dive and then dive your plan. When you're doing something very risky like deep sea diving, you need to make sure you are following that plan correctly because your life is literally at stake. And so in retirement, you should do the same thing. Plan out your retirement and then stick to that retirement plan. You also want to make sure that you're taking taxes into account and that you have a specific tax strategy coupled with that withdrawal strategy. So you want to make sure that you're withdrawing and making your withdrawals from the right accounts in the right order, from Roth, non-retirement, pre-tax, and that you're not giving away money that you don't have to, paying unnecessary taxes and creating a drag on your returns and your investment balance. Additionally, make sure you're taking healthcare costs into account. That can come up and surprise a lot of people. I didn't mention it specifically in the cases that I talked about, but long-term care costs can come up and be a big game changer in retirement. Make sure that you have a plan in there to cover if something like that happens. And so now hopefully you have an understanding of how two retirees can start with an identical level of savings yet experience dramatically different outcomes just based on their behavior. If you want a personalized analysis of your retirement strategy, just fill out the questionnaire, click the link below the video to fill it out. I will send you back a personalized video showing you how to optimize your approach based on your specific situation. If I can help, just let me know. I appreciate you watching, and I will see you in the next one.